afternoon, everyone. We're going to call to order the meeting of the Fire and Police Commission for April 25th at 4:01 p.m. Can we conduct roll call, Ms. Clerk?
Absolutely. Commissioner Herlinger?
Present.
Commissioner Jones?
Aquí.
Commissioner Rodriguez?
Here.
Chair Dozer?
Here.
Vice Chair Hill?
Here.
Ms. Clerk and Commissioners, are there any changes to the agenda?
Chair Dozer, there are no changes to the agenda.
Thank you, Ms. Clerk. We can now move on to agenda item number 4, please.
Item number 4, consent calendar, sub-item A, approval of private patrol operator permit for Simply Safe Security Company.
Do any of the commissioners want to pull this from the consent agenda to discuss it? Negative? All right. We can vote on this.
Is there no public comment? I didn't hear if there's any public comment.
Oh,
anything.
is there any public comment? Is there any public comment online? Thank you for that reminder.
Chair Dozer, we did not have any public comment online or in person.
Perfect, thank you. Now we can vote.
Motion passes.
All right, let's move on to item number 5.
I have a question. Is the applicant in the room now? So I just wanted to just take a moment and thank you for your application and for coming today. Yeah.
Yes, thank you very much. I didn't realize you were here, and I was trying to expedite things. All right, item number 5.
General public comment.
Do we have any cards for public comment or anyone online?
Chair Dozer, we do not have any public comment.
All right. Can you read today's, I guess, our first agenda item, which really is going to be number 6?
Item 6, approval of meeting minutes from March 28, 2024.
Is there any public comment on this item?
Chair Dozer, we do not have any comments on this item.
Do we have a motion to approve the minutes from March 28, 2024?
So moved.
Second.
All right, we have a motion from Commissioner Hill, seconded by Commissioner Herlinger. Any discussion or objections? Hearing none, we can vote.
I did. I think I did. Do it twice.
Oh, to do it again? Sorry.
Okay, good.
Motion passes.
Thank you. Agenda item number 7.
Item number 7, City of Santa Barbara fiscal year 2025 budget overview and Police Department and Fire Department priorities and challenges.
Good afternoon, members of the Commission. My name is Keith DeMartini, and I'm the city's finance director. It is my pleasure to be here to present an overview of the city administrator's recommended budget for fiscal year 2025 and talk about a few other topics related to the budget process. I'll first start with giving an overview of the city council priorities in a process that they went through fairly recently. I will then give an overview of Vision 2030, and this is a sort of a staff-led effort to implement good governance and good practices across the city organization. I will then give an overview of the fiscal year 2025 budget, And I'll then talk about Essential SB, which is a communication tool that we are using to engage pretty significantly with the community about our financial and budgetary challenges and issues and gather their input. And then I would welcome your questions and any discussion. So first, let me talk about the City Council priorities. The City Council had a public workshop just a couple of months ago where they confirmed an annual process that they will go through to develop and refine their priorities as a city council. And that process and the outcome of that process every year will help shape the annual budgeting process. We want to make sure that we are aligning our financial resources with the priorities of the community and the city council. It also helps to provide really clear direction to staff about those priorities, and it will help, as I said earlier, guide our financial planning and budgeting processes. It is really important to note, however, that the vast majority of the work, the day-to-day work, still has to get done, and so these priorities are meant to be sort of encompassing of the work that is already, quite frankly, being done across the city organization, or potentially new initiatives that may come about as well. This list right here is the initial draft list of city council priorities that they established just a couple of months ago, which include economic vitality, community stability, emergency preparedness, sustainability and resilience, and quality of life. And as I mentioned earlier, a lot of the work that is currently being done, the way in which our budget is structured, and the priorities in each department, much of that already falls within this structure, and so we'll be working over time to make sure that we're communicating to the public about our resource allocation and the time and effort dedicated to these types of initiatives and priorities. I'm not going to go over this in detail, but this is the annual process that the council agreed to proceed with when setting the priorities for the upcoming fiscal year and then refining them going forward. And I'll just highlight on this table that it really starts with a really intense information gathering process, with gathering information from the community through surveys, town halls, other mechanisms and other meetings and such. So now let's talk about Vision 2030. This is an effort that came about just a little over a year ago, and it really is designed to implement best practices in government as far as making sure that we are operating efficiently, we're providing services to the community in an effective, transparent way, that we're generating revenue to fund those types of operations. And it really kind of stemmed from some of the financial and budgetary challenges that we face as an organization. We don't just do budgeting in one-year increments. Yes, one-year budgets do come to you for recommendations and they come to City Council for approval, but we are looking out 3, 4, 5 years because we can do some pretty accurate planning going out that far for a lot of our services. And we know that we have budget deficits being projected in those years. And so we are able to identify those issues through our multi-year planning process. And then we're able to address those issues sort of early on to try and offset the larger implications of those going forward. This slide right here summarizes what some of those budgetary and financial challenges are. We have had issues in recent years in regards to retention and recruitment. A lot of that is definitely felt in the police department, but across other organizations in the city as well. We continue to have challenges with affording labor wage increases that come about during our labor bargaining process with our labor groups. Healthcare costs have increased substantially as well over the past couple of years. Our pension costs for our employees has increased substantially as well, and there's great volatility with CalPERS's annual rate of return and the high unfunded liability that we carry on our balance sheet because of that. There also is economic uncertainty. Yeah, there hasn't really been a recession. There's been talk of it for the past couple of years, but there is instability because of that. And we see that in the volatility of some of our major tax revenues, such as transient occupancy tax and sales tax, which is more volatile than other taxes. High inflation, it costs more to operate this city, just flat out. And so it's just really expensive to kind of procure the goods and services that we need to be able to run the city at the current level. We have a reserve policy. City Council adopted policy, and that states that we need to have cash in the bank that is available to the city to be able to respond in times of emergency. And we have had disasters and emergencies in the not so distant past through the recent storms that we've had, fires, COVID. We have leveraged those reserves to minimize the impact on the community more so than is absolutely necessary. And it's also just really expensive to insure our city. We have hundreds of properties and facilities and buildings, and property insurance in particular is just really, really expensive. If you're a homeowner, I'm sure you can relate. So again, why this initiative? We're thinking long-term. We're trying to identify ways of streamlining and ways of providing the same level of service to the community in a cost-effective and in a very customer service-focused way. We're trying to identify ways of generating more revenue from our existing revenue sources and looking at ways of generating new revenue as well. And we're really just trying to improve our operations so that the citizens and visitors receive good service from the city. With that, we have established these core working groups, and these groups are working on those key initiatives. There's a lot of great work being done in each of them, and still a lot more work to do. But a lot of the great work that's already been done has been built into the recommended budget going forward. So with that, I just want to give a high-level overview of the budget process, and I know that the two chiefs will be presenting their department budgets to you just after my presentation. Staff has been hard at work on the budget for the past 6 months. We have been reviewing the cost for running our programs, what it takes for us to buy equipment, vehicles, our staffing levels. All of those proposals were vetted very thoroughly with my office and the city administrator's office, and the whole city budget was packaged together and presented publicly to the city council this past Tuesday. So it's here before you today. Many of the boards and commissions are receiving department budget proposals as well, and your feedback is instrumental in regards to the public process about our budget. Over the next couple of weeks, we will have a really robust, again, public process through the city council about their review of each departmental budget, and it is scheduled to be adopted by the city council on June 11th. So there's about a month and a half, a little bit more, of public interaction with the budget. Our budget is completely available online. It is very transparent. We have an online budget tool that has very easy user navigation to go to any specific part of the budget that you would like. There's information from the city administrator, our process. There is a really robust language translation on every single page of the budget as well. And so we've made improvements to this budget presentation over the years. It's really important to note that the budget before you today is an update to the 2-year financial plan that the City Council adopted last year. So the City Council has a 2-year financial planning process. And so we are in that mid-cycle update where we're just talking about major changes from the 2nd year of that plan. And so that's how the budget is being prepared and presented publicly to you and the City Council. This slide summarizes some of the major changes that we will see in fiscal year 2025 compared to the 2nd year of the plan. We are assuming that some of the salary and pension cost increases are going to be a little bit higher for the reasons I mentioned earlier. Some of our tax revenues, unfortunately, are kind of softening out. So we had reached sort of a new normal, a new high level kind of normal post-COVID. But the rate of increases of those taxes is not as high as previously projected. So it's kind of coming down a little bit. We have dedicated positions and other resources allocated for the implementation of the housing element, which the City Council approved not so long ago. Inflation is still high, it's coming down, but it's still a little bit higher than more normal times. Downtown parking is having some financial challenges, and so there is a pretty significant rate change proposal for the downtown parking programs that is included in the recommended budget. And because really they have some depleting reserves, and so they need to make some adjustments in fiscal year 2025. The overall general fund deficit in fiscal year 2025 is $7.1 million. The police department and the fire department are predominantly funded by the general fund. It's one of the core functions that is funded by the general fund. This slide here shows our multi-year forecast, and it shows our revenues in that dotted green line and our expenditures in the solid red line. And you can see that the gap between the two lines is there, and it actually widens in the out year. And so we have this structural deficit. Our revenue growth is not enough to cover the ongoing expenditure growth. And that is really what is causing that deficit to occur. I mentioned earlier the deficit in fiscal year 2025 is projected to be $7.1 million. And this table on the far right column itemizes how we calculate that deficit when looking at our revenues minus our expenditures. And because we have this reserve policy target, which requires us to keep a little bit more money in the bank each year as our expenditures grow, that's how you get to the 7.1. What's also really important to note on this table is that over the past 5 years, the city has implemented a series of expenditure reductions to help with this problem, to help with not having so high of a deficit. And it's important to note that if we did not implement those expenditure reductions, the deficit would have been larger. It would have been about 11.2 million. This slide here summarizes the budget hearing schedule. You can see that we've actually had a series of meetings already with Finance Committee and City Council leading up to the budget introduction this past Tuesday. We'll be continuing with Finance Committee over the next couple of weeks. Both the Police Department and Fire Department budgets will be presented to the City Council on the regular meeting on May 14th. So that's an opportunity for, again, the public to comment on the budget proposals. We have all the other funds on May 21st, and then the deliberations will begin in June with adoption scheduled on June 11th. So now let me shift gears and talk about Essential SB. And so this slide here is the webpage that we have off of the city's main site for Essential SB. And this has been an effort that has been underway for a number of months where staff, myself and other staff have been out in the community meeting with different groups and boards and commissions and really talking about the core services that we provide to the city currently and some of our budgetary and financial challenges, all the topics that I've already been presenting to you today. It's really an opportunity to educate the community, and it's really an opportunity for city staff to hear from the community about what their priorities are. What are some of the challenges they are facing and their issues? There's a survey instrument, both in English and in Spanish, off of this site. We've been collecting a lot of really great information that the City Council will ultimately be receiving and be using for further budgetary and other discussions and topics. It's also important to note that as part of this effort, the city is considering a potential revenue measure for the upcoming election in the ballot in November of 2024. The city is considering a half-cent transactions and use tax. It's a sales tax. And the funding from this measure could be used for services that include all of the items on this screen. It could be used for maintaining 911, emergency, fire, paramedic, police response, keeping neighborhood fire stations open, improving housing affordability, keeping public areas and parks safe and clean, protecting local drinking water, stormwater protection, improving natural disaster preparedness, and retaining local businesses and jobs. And so the city is currently considering this. There will be a finance committee meeting in May, and then it will ultimately go to the city council for a vote from them if they would like to have it go forward on the election on June 11th. When you're looking at Santa Barbara's tax rate, it's currently at 8.75%. And that is it's the same as many other cities in Santa Barbara County or even in San Luis Obispo. You can see it's a little bit lower than Carpinteria at this time. But when you compare Santa Barbara to other cities like ours, like a Pasadena or a Santa Monica, like a city that's a little bit larger, a tourist destination, it actually is on the lower side compared to some of those cities. It's also important to note that there is a cap. There is a cap of 9.25%. That's the maximum rate that we can have here in the city of Santa Barbara. And so if a half-cent sales tax rate were to be approved, it would take us up to the cap. And then this final slide kind of summarizes the potential revenue measure. It's projected that it would generate approximately $15.6 million annually. And again, it would go towards those essential city services that I described on the prior slide. It's also important to note that 100% of that revenue stays here in the city of Santa Barbara, whereas the majority of the current 8.75% rate, majority of that goes to the state of California. And again, all of those funds would go towards maintaining existing essential city services. And so that concludes my presentations. I'd be happy to take any questions that you have. Thank you again for having me.
Thank you so much for that presentation. Commissioners, do you have any questions? Commissioner Herlinger.
I just had, where does the cap come from, the 9.25?
Yeah.
Does it come from the state?
It does. It does come from the state. And you'll see that the rates do vary across many of the cities in California. And there are a lot of factors associated with that. Any city can get a tax measure approved by their voters. The county can also get a tax measure approved by their voters. And so if a city is in a county where the county doesn't have a sales tax rate, the city's rate could be higher, right? And sort of vice versa. And so it really just kind of depends on a number of factors.
Thank you.
Commissioner Hill?
My question was just answered.
No, never mind. Commissioner Rodriguez?
I was just, I appreciate the transparency of the budget on the website. I'm just wondering if you can share with the public the map to get there.
I would be happy to. So on this slide, slide 14, the web link, the URL is on the bottom right there. And if you go to the city's homepage and you type in budget on the search screen, it will also take you there. And there's, again, very easy navigation to get through it with Spanish translation and other translation services as well.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Commissioner Jones?
Thank you. Thank you for your presentation. Couple questions. You'd mentioned there was a mention in one of the slides about carryovers. I'm assuming that's funds that weren't expended from the previous year that are then carried forward. Is that factored into your analysis, or is there a particular policy or protocol about how those carry forward funds are used?
Yeah, thank you for that question. So yes, so one of the sort of odd things with government accounting, to be honest with you, and so it's probably easy if I answer that question with an example. And so the way that we budget for and let out a construction contract for like a large capital project is we have to have all of the budget up front ready to be used for that construction contract. And we lock up those funds, we encumber them all at the very beginning of the project. But that project may take 2 or 3 years to complete. And over that time, we're paying invoices, right? And so the portion of the unspent funds in that first year get carried forward into the next fiscal year. And so you will see carry forwards in our current fiscal year, in fiscal year 2024, where money from a prior year moved into fiscal year 2024.
So those are committed funds, essentially.
Exactly, yeah. They're committed funds. They're already allocated for that specific purpose, that specific project, and really can't be used for anything else unless it was an action by city council to sort of free it up for another purpose.
Great, thank you. And just one more question. Did I hear correctly that the percentage for the reserves is 7.1? And you keep that at 7.1%?
No, actually, the city council reserve policy is a 25% reserve. And so there are two main components to it. There's a disaster reserve requirement of 15% and a contingency reserve of 10%. And that, which adds up to 25%. And so that's 25% of next year's annual expenditure budget. So the concept is that we should have 3 months worth of cash in the bank if something were to dramatically happen, to be able to continue operating the city for that period of time.
All right, thank you for clarifying.
Yes.
Commissioner Herlinger?
So I don't know if we're going to get this from police and fire, but when the budget is made, is that assuming that all the positions are filled, or is there a vacancy allowance?
Yeah, it's a great question. So we do assume a natural level of attrition, a natural level of salary savings from positions that are either currently that are currently not filled, positions that we might anticipate that they will be unfilled for some period of time in the next fiscal year, Or also what has occurred over the last couple of years, and particularly in the police department, is that there are a number of positions that are purposefully unfilled in order to meet their expenditure reduction targets. And so those positions have been unfilled as well. So we budget for the position to be incurring the cost of the full position for the full fiscal year, and then we might adjust those positions down based on the sort of attrition that you mentioned.
Commissioner Hill?
Yeah, this may be a completely misunderstanding question, but if there was indeed a approval of the half-cent tax, we anticipate an additional $15 million in annual revenue?
Yes, Commissioner, that is correct. If it were to be approved, then annually, the projection is $15.6 million.
And that would well settle the outstanding deficit at the present time. Is that correct?
Yes, that's a great question. So, yes, it would absolutely help with the city's financial position for the budget challenges that we face as an organization. And a lot of those resources would likely go towards, right, the essential city services that I mentioned earlier. But what I will say is that our multi-year forecast for our revenues and expenditures, that gap continues to widen. And so looking at a sales tax measure or any other type of tax measure needs to be one of likely multiple revenue generating and sort of expenditure reduction, or sort of looking at how we can increase efficiencies, organizational optimization, lots of different strategies. And all of those strategies are really sort of under the umbrella of Vision 2030. So this sort of this forward-thinking, good government, like trying to deliver services the best way possible to the community. And so the best way for me to answer that is it's one component of a much larger program and initiative to address going forward.
So if the sales tax was approved and the $15 million was obtained, that would be over a year. And during that time period, there would be a process under the Vision 2030 where that would be determined as to what portion of it could be used in this year for essential services and what needed to be saved for future fallbacks. Who does that? Who makes that final decision?
And Commissioner, that's a great question. I appreciate that. So this would be a funding source in the general fund. It's being proposed as a general purpose district sales tax measure. So it becomes a general purpose. So it would be part of the general fund. And it is the responsibility of the city administrator per our city charter to recommend to the city council about how those general fund dollars are to be allocated. That's the very robust budget process that I laid out a little bit earlier. And ultimately, it's the city council that approves, that adopts the budget. And that's really done through that really robust public process that we kind of laid out, which includes this commission.
Thank you.
Thank you. I just have a quick question, a procedural question for City Attorney Doimas. Can I wait until the end of the agenda item to ask for public comment, or do I need to after each speaker?
So usually, Chair Dozier, usually we would go through the presentation, the question period. Now we would start with public comment for each item, so we'd open up right now. Then we would do any deliberation after that. So is that your question?
Chair Dozier, this is all one item.
Yes,
So we
it
can
is.
wait until the additional two
thank you.
presentations are completed and then
That was
open
my
for
question.
Oh, got it, okay. I thought, I was confused in terms of, got it.
You answered the question, just differently.
Sort of.
Thank you.
Do you have any questions?
No.
Now I know what you meant. You're talking about the parts of the presentation. Okay, got it, got it.
Somebody's got to keep an eye on you. Good afternoon, Chair Dozier, Fire and Police Commission. So I'm going to start the presentation, and then I'm going to turn it over to our business manager that I don't believe you've had the pleasure of meeting yet. Alec is the one that keeps our numbers and all of things related to the business office on track, which includes me many of the times. So we're going to go through just a real quick overview of our department organization, revenues, expenses, our budget reductions, an overview of 2024, and then our ongoing priorities and our core goals that are related to the Vision 2030. So as you're all aware, I just want to put it on the big screen for you to look at. This is our overall organizational structure. So at full strength, we should have 142 sworn, which includes myself, and 68 professional staff for a total number of positions of 210. So you can see community accountability, you can see our operations division, investigations, field operations. This just gives you an overview of all the different things that are comprised within the police department within our budget. So for the fiscal year for 2024, our budget was $66 million, which is a little different because it also included some funding in there for the new police station building. So when you look at this next fiscal year, there is a difference, but that's in large part to some of that funding. In 2024, as we've talked about, we expanded our wellness and on-duty fitness program. We increased our training. We increased co-response and our ability to write mental health holds. We greatly improved our hiring practices. We hired 10 officers and 19 professional staff in the year 2023. So that's not all of fiscal year 24, but that is the 1 year calendar year. I am happy to say at this very moment, we currently have a much better number than we've had in a long time. We have 17 vacancies for sworn. However, as you will see, we actually can only hire for 8 of those currently, and we have enough in backgrounds to actually fill all those positions in the next year. In terms of our professional staff, we're down to, technically, I think we have 11 vacancies, but we have 2 new animal control officers starting on Monday. We have an admin analyst starting in the next 2 weeks, so that number is actually down to single digits. And we have everyone in the hiring process open for all positions except for 1 position that we've held off on opening. So we are actively recruiting and hiring and filling all those positions. Our current vacancy rate is now less than 20%. And I don't give you an exact number because it actually literally changes every day with, like I said, we have 2 new animal control officers starting on Monday. And then at the end of the week, we have one of our animal control officers retiring. So it's a number that's in bit of a flux, but I think that gives you an overall idea of, I think in a couple months, maybe even May, I don't remember, we'll talk specifically about our hiring practices, but kind of wanted to just give you an idea of that as we're talking. Recruitment and hiring, of course, are challenges. Technology implementation, as wonderful as technology is, the implementation never goes as planned, so to speak. We have a lot of special events, and we've had an increased number of First Amendment events within the city. Those are all staffing challenges for us and have been, which will continue in the future, but they've been particularly challenging over the last year. Moving into 25, our priorities still remain retention and recruitment. The retention is a big piece of that, not just the recruitment, as we look to fill specialized positions and other things that keep the officers that we have here invested and not wanting to leave for another department. Our goal within 25 is to the mission strategies that we present to you. We're hoping to have a public-facing platform before the end of 25. It's something that we're committed to. Updating our career development plan, and I'm hopeful that we might be able to bring our Explorer program back in 25. It's a priority, but I actually don't know that that will happen in 25. Violent crime down, property crime down. We talked about last month the number of training hours, and I would also like to highlight our social media post has really increased, and that's part of that community engagement piece. So over 600 posts in the last year. Department priorities, recruitment within the local community. As you have seen, many of you attended our last swearing in. We're continuing to recruit from our local community. I'm proud to announce that on Friday tonight, which is tomorrow night, we have our 25th year anniversary celebration of PAL, and Romeo Lopez, who was a former participant in PAL, who now we have hired in the last year and has completed field training last month and is out solo patrol right now, and is one such example of how we're recruiting from the local community, aligning our department resources and investing in employee personal and professional growth, which goes to that, the training hours that we've talked about and our physical fitness and mental health wellness program.
And with that, I will be providing a brief overview of the department's recommended budget for FY25. Starting with revenues, I wanted to detail some of the more significant categories, just to provide additional detail and kind of clarification of what these items are to give you an understanding of these categories. Fines and forfeitures, the majority of this revenue is generated from our parking citations. Moving to our fees and service charges. This is revenue primarily received from the peace officer standards and training. These are reimbursements that that is received by the department for staff who attend training throughout the state. In addition to that, we receive revenue from the security alarm response program that the department holds. Moving to the intergovernmental category. This category represents the department's grant funding. It's important to note that this funding is not budgeted until it's received. So you'll notice that FY25 is a little bit lower than 24, and it will increase once those grants are received within that next fiscal year. Moving to taxes. This is revenue received from the state enacted public safety half-cent sales tax. It's used to purchase equipment and help supplement the department as a whole. The next category, the use of money and property. In previous years, this account allocated for the replacement of our mobile computers that are used within our vehicles. This is no longer being used, and you'll notice in the FY25 recommended budget that it's zero. We're moving to utilizing our Measure C funding to purchase this critical equipment. Moving to expenditures, we have our salaries and benefits for our department. The salaries include our permanent hires and our hourly positions. In addition, it includes our overtime expensed for our staff. Our allocated costs, some of the larger items within the allocated costs, these are interdepartmental services provided to the police department from other departments. And that includes fleet replacement and maintenance of our vehicles that are used within the department. In addition to that, it includes our building maintenance allocation. Moving to the capital equipment and projects. This category represents the Measure C funding for the new police building. I do want to note that it is within the police budget. However, it is managed primarily by Public Works, the police building aspect of that. And then moving to the special projects category, the American Rescue Plan Act is part of the expenditures that are within this category. It's known as ARPA, and this funds our co-response program. One thing I would like to note with that, it's a multi-year funding, so it will carry over into FY25. So that's part of the reason why it's a little bit lower for 25, but it will transfer over. The next slide details the FY24 and 25 budget for Measure C. So the department receives $450,000 for equipment purchases. We detailed the FY24 equipment projects just to give an example of the type of equipment that's being purchased with these funds. That includes ballistic vests, e-bikes for our CAT team. We have a 911 call log that is being implemented within the department, and additional examples are there too. The next slide, I want to highlight that this is a general fund distribution of the police department budget, specifically general fund. Really, the objective of the slide is to show that the supplies and services distribution accounts for only 6.7% of the department's general fund budget. I would like to highlight the expenses in this category are they're basic operational expenses of the department. That's utilities, office supplies, really the items that kind of keep the doors open, the lights on within the departments are essential kind of basic items that we utilize. And I would like to note that the department has a very limited discretionary spending outside of these expenses. So the Measure C funding is very critical for us. This next slide details the department's FY24 and 25 budget reduction targets. For 25, the budget reduction target was met by holding 1 specialty sergeant position and 4 specialty officer positions. These aren't eliminating the positions, but freezing the positions for this upcoming fiscal year. The next item was the elimination of the range master position. This was made effective in July of 2023. And then the elimination of the funding for the department's record bureau hourly positions. With these items, we exceeded the FY25 budget reduction. Thank you.
Very quickly, I'm just going to go over our core goals. So with core, the pillars are preset. So you'll see it's innovation. Oh, there's one on there twice. This is a good catch. Organizational optimization. Oh, there's 2 for each. Okay. The thriving workforce. So a couple of things is we are trying to leverage technology, as you can see. The second one is the implementation of using the BI tools for the public platform. The organizational optimization for the hiring and getting our vacancy rate down to the 15%, less than 15%. Moving field operations to an 11-hour plan schedule, which we have already done, which actually has been very beneficial in many ways besides allowing us to do the more training and scheduling. It's actually allowed us to also reduce our overtime. The annual mental health check-ins, which I am proud to announce have started this month and will continue. And then having sergeants commanders attend a use of force investigation training. We actually had an outside presenter come in and present to all of the commanders and sergeants. So the way this is done is because this is a 2-year budget cycle, we're at mid. We did not do once for 24 and then 25. These were 2-year core goals. So, and it's different because the way they present in terms of the unit of measure can be difficult to understand because like for the sergeants and commanders, it wasn't a target of 100, it was 100% of all of them attending, which we met. So just as you look at it, sometimes the numeric value can be confusing unless you look all the way across the row. So that's just a little more explanation to that. These are 2-year, that's why several of them we've already are well into. And I will say the annual test of an incident disaster response recovery scenario, we actually had a real life one with dispatch going down during the storm. So we've more than completed that with an actual real life scenario on that one. With that, we'll take any questions that are specific for us before we turn it over to the fire department.
Commissioner, no? Okay. Commissioner Jones?
Thank you very much. Let me go backwards. In one of the slides, or the slide on Measure C funding, it mentioned a traffic accident digital reconstruction equipment. Can you tell me what that is?
Yeah, it's called FARO, and it's a machine that's, I don't know, about this big. We just got it. It sits on a tripod, and what it actually does is take all the measurements of the scene so that then when the traffic investigator, if you haven't had the pleasure, I'd love to show you of, you actually have to be more of a mathematician than a police officer to do accident reconstruction. So it takes all of the measurements at the scene so that they can reconstruct what actually had at the accident. So it literally measures curb to curb, where cars are, where debris lies, where the skid marks lay. So that's how they actually scan the entire traffic collision scene, and then are able to use that to diagram and actually do all the fun things that, if I had our traffic investigator, Casper, here, he can explain the coefficient of friction and all sorts of other things that I don't understand. But that's the purpose of it. So versus an officer having to get out and roll that with a roll tape, this is all done digitally. And this particular system is court certified as well, so it can be used in court testimony as well.
So then I imagine because of that, you're able to kind of get more answers a lot faster. You should have that
That is the
information.
hope. I mean, it's still a very arduous process with all of the calculations they have to do, but it certainly takes the amount of time that it takes to process a scene. It cuts that down significantly, and it's much more accurate. Not that, you know, a roll of tape's not accurate, but technology is our friend when it comes to this. It allows us to also show diagrams that are factual based on the scan.
Wonderful, thank you. Another question that was on one of the original revenue slide, there was a line item that said internal charges. You skipped over that one. I was wondering, it was $200. I wonder if you could tell me what that was, or tell us.
Yeah, let me get that out. Internal charges is, the category represents our traffic safety fund. It's a transfer that happens within the department. It's grant funded, or it's in our miscellaneous grant, and it's a tax that's received, I believe, through the DMV. So that was a pre-established funding that's received through the registration of cars, and we get a set amount, and then that gets transferred into our internal charges, a category within the general fund.
Thank you.
Yeah.
And Chief, you mentioned, this is my last question, you mentioned having a public-facing platform. Could you expand upon that, please?
Sure. So when we do, like you'll see today, we'll do a slide on our quarterly statistics with the mission strategies. Our goal is to have a platform that the public can access, you know, very similar to OpenGov, where you can, at the city level, access information. There are some things that we have online that you can see and maps that you can see, but our goal is to have the mission strategies data available to the public so that the access is at your fingertips versus relying on us just to provide the statistics, that you will be able to go onto the system and see that at any time.
All right, thank you.
Commissioner Rodriguez?
That's a great goal, by the way. I appreciate that. I have a couple questions. Where is the opioid funding listed in the revenue, or is it listed in there?
It is, I just don't remember which one it's in.
I would need to check on that one.
And then I know at the time that it was a community group questioned about that and to have participation in it, there was still questions on how that funding was going to be allocated, and you were seeking public input on where folks thought it should be allocated to within its very strict restrictions. I'm wondering if we could schedule an update on that, if we've gotten any progress.
There's not an update actually to give at this very moment.
Yeah.
We've had some staffing challenges, so that will be coming hopefully in the fall. We have some thought process and some ideas at this point, but we have not moved forward with that. In fact, we just had a discussion about it at this week's managers meeting, but we have had some staffing challenges, and that has not been able to be accomplished at this point. But it is something that hopefully in the fall we will be able to start moving forward on.
Okay. And I believe that this year, I don't know if it was technically considered an El Nino year, but I know we had more flooding than we normally do in previous years, which meant that it costed the department more money because of the overtime and other expenses. I'm wondering if that is on a specific line item, if there's reimbursement that comes, if it's considered a state of emergency. And then I know the county was late in receiving reimbursement, and I'm wondering if we're affected on a city level.
Yes, we won't receive reimbursement for quite some time. Mr. DiMartini can tell you the amount of headaches that causes for finance, and they work through that, but a lot of that actually doesn't end up being reimbursable. there's a limited amount of that, especially with the way the storms rolled out, that's actually reimbursable. That comes out of the expenses of our overtime budget. And I only know from, because we just did our third quarter reports that we were just looking at today for budget. But even with that, our overtime usage is down for the year.
Oh, good.
So far, I think we're down about 6% in our overtime usage. And I would imagine we'd probably be more like 8% or 8.5% without all of the storm response overtime. But I would also expect that to continue in different ways, whether it's storms or fires, that's one of those variables that will always be within the budget.
Yeah.
And to add a little bit more information to that response, for the overtime and storm-related, those are FEMA reimbursable events, and it has to be denoted, and we record all officer overtime and provide that to finance for reimbursement.
And then my last question, without going into a rabbit hole, I know we've talked about previously the amount of service and cost associated with homeless services. And I'm just wondering about conversations of being more proactive with treatment and services and allocating funding in that area as opposed to relying on reactive services and expenses.
The city has a robust plan when dealing with all of those issues that are related to that. And the city is being very proactive and moving towards the Daytime Navigation Center and other ways and sources of funding to address that. For us, those resources come out in the matter of, in terms of staff time and the officers that respond to those things. But the city has a full, unrelated to this, has a full accounting of where the money is spent in terms of the city budget on that. But like I said, the city is actually being very proactive with how they've extended their contracts with Good Sam and CityNet, and now with the Navigation Center, and how the city is working with proactively with all of those resources. So it's not a direct line item out of the department's budget, and quite frankly, we don't have the money to take out of our budget at this point. If we took money out of our budget, that would be holding more sworn officer positions.
Mm-hmm.
And Commissioner Rodriguez, I wanted to add in regards to my role overseeing homelessness for the city does not receive funding for mental health treatment or substance abuse treatment at all. That's all county-directed funds. So you'll see, even in the police department budget, the co-response team is general fund funded or ARPA funded. So the expansion of 2 co-response teams to 7-day-a-week coverage has been funded by ARPA. So this is a huge gap we consider, especially with cities dealing with the day-to-day management of homelessness. We are working on strengthening our partnership with the county in terms of how we make referrals for individuals that we interact with that need that specialized outreach, attention, and support. But again, we're at a loss as a city in terms of being able to receive those funds to be more proactive and to be able to offset. So the Daytime Navigation Center, general fund funded, it's Measure C partially funded, and we're having private donations come in to make that happen.
And knowing that Santa Barbara has the highest number of homeless residents in our city compared to the county, is there something that the commission can do to propose to the county that we receive dedicated funds, or propose to the state that we receive dedicated funds?
Yes, we would love the commission to be able to weigh in on that. We can certainly address homelessness as it relates to the police department and fire department under your purview. Most recently, we advocated for and worked with the county to be a co-applicant of a funding application to the state. And so we were actually awarded vehicular encampment response funds because our numbers are growing within the city, and we have the significant proportion of people experiencing vehicular homelessness countywide. We'll actually get $1.4 million directed to us on behalf of that larger countywide project to be able to have that tailorized, I would say, approach to what we're dealing with within the city. So you're right, we're trying to do that incrementally, but would love for the commission to weigh in as appropriate under your purview.
So I wonder if we could schedule for a future meeting, whether it's on an agenda that we receive training or presentation on possibilities, or maybe even schedule a special study session where we can hear from the public on their suggestions.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Thanks.
Commissioner Herlinger?
I just had a question on the revenues. When you talked about the training line, this was the second line under the revenues, I think. Well, where's that money coming from? Is that coming from the general fund?
When
Or-
we receive money, it's directly, so if an officer goes to a peace officer, so it's called POST, our Peace Officer Standards and Training class,
Okay,
depending on, there are different levels, and I don't want to get into a detailed explanation, but there's different levels of reimbursement that we get from the state for sending officers to those trainings.
okay. So it comes from the state?
Yes, so
Okay.
that directly comes from the state budget. That number also fluctuates depending on the state budget, because they allocate a certain dollar amount per year for those reimbursements. So sometimes we'll get reimbursement for 3/4 of the year and not the last part of the year because they stop their reimbursements. The last couple years, we've been very fortunate because the state has been a little more flush with money, and we've gotten a lot of our training reimbursed, but that's what that is. That comes from the state.
Okay.
And we submit for those reimbursements.
Thank you.
All right, I think that's the end of the commissioners' questions. Thank you.
Good afternoon, Chair, Commissioners. My name is Chris Males, Fire Chief. With me to my right is Amy Van Atta. Amy is our Fire Department's business manager. This may be the first time you're meeting her. She's been with the department for about 16 months or so, but she comes to us with 7 years of experience in business administration from Oxnard Police Department, followed by 5 years of experience at Oxnard Fire. So she is our business manager, and between the two of us, we'll be giving you the presentation on the fire department. So similar agenda, department organization, revenues, expenses, FY25 budget reductions, and a quick overview of our core program. You've seen this before, but this is our organizational chart, or our org chart. It represents 105 personnel that are currently assigned to the fire department. It's in a typical hierarchical structure of a fire department, fire chief at the top, followed by 4 divisions, administration, operations, fire prevention, and emergency services. The bulk of our personnel work in operations. This is an important slide to look at. A couple of things with this slide. So this is just a repeat of the organizational chart, but what the highlighted yellow really means are 2 things. Number one, the personnel that are highlighted are what we would call boots on the ground people. Everyone under the operations section, starting with battalion chiefs down through captains, they're folks that work on fire apparatus on a daily basis. And then underneath the fire marshal, your fire inspectors are also out public-facing, forward-facing in the community. Also, these positions are protected by one of 3 different union contracts that we have with the city, or through the city of Santa Barbara. You have your Firefighters Association, you have Fire Managers Association, and you have general employees also. The Firefighters Association has a clause in their contract which mandates that we maintain coverage, which is good. We maintain 24-hour, 7-day-a-week coverage of all of our fire stations. And so when we get into a bit of the discussion about overtime, that comes with what we call the constant staffing model that we use. What constant staffing means is that 24 hours a day, there is a person sitting in each seat of a fire truck. We don't run short. We don't brown out. If someone is sick, we replace them with someone else. So very important that, because that's what contributes to the cost of providing service, because again, we are a 24/7 operation. Also, what's important is that the positions that are not highlighted, there are 12 people. So of our 105 personnel, 12 are really what we would call support personnel, and that includes myself, the operations chief, Amy, of the emergency services manager, the PIO, our wildland section. We run a very lean fire department, but I'll say we're very effective and very efficient also. So we have 105 authorized FTEs. We have 6 current vacancies in the department. This is very typical. In the 31 years that I've been on the department, we typically hire about every 2 years, and we hire between 6 and 10 people. Sometimes I think we've gone as many as 12. But what we'll do, in this situation with 6 current vacancies, we're going to be starting a hiring process very soon, and we're likely going to hire probably 9 or 10 people. And the reason is that we hire 3 additional people than we have vacancies for, and that allows us to smooth out our requirements to run an academy. Our general fund budget is $35 million. Some of the highlights from fiscal year '24, as I mentioned to you the last time we met, we had about 11,560 incidents. We have, I know I've shared this with you, but I'm particularly excited the fact that we received 2 really significant grants this last year. One was from the Coastal Conservancy, and another is through CAL FIRE. Both of those grants are allowing a great collaborative effort between Parks and Rec and the fire department. And so what we're doing with that is we have hired some vegetation management crew, a hand crew, that is going out and is working in the parks in Santa Barbara, lowering the fuels, taking out the invasive species, et cetera. And it's the first time we've ever had this crew. They're an hourly crew, which means they're limited to 1,000 hours per year. So this crew that we're currently running is funded under Coastal Conservancy, and we'll be hiring an additional crew through the CAL FIRE grant. And the CAL FIRE grant lasts for 5 years. It's almost a $3 million grant. So we're very fortunate to see really what we call proactive fuels reduction in all of our parks all over the city. We also were able to secure 2 new Pierce manufacturing, 2 new Pierce fire apparatus with 2 more in the works. Just as a side note, I was reading something that was rather interesting. There has been a 100% increase in the cost of fire apparatus since 2011. And that is actually in the last couple months has even gone up significantly more. We were able to order a new ladder truck probably 6 months ago for about $1.7 million, and the cost of that ladder truck today is $2.3 million. So the costs are increasing astronomically, and it's very tough for all departments to be able to forecast that massive amount of spending. Oh, and by the way, apparatus are 3 to 5 years out. So I was literally sitting in a chief's meeting today, and they said, "You want a fire truck in 5 years, you better order it today." So it's a bit of a problem for us. In fiscal year '24, we did have 2 EOC activations. Some challenges for us, continue to focus on natural disasters, including fires and floods. As you know, we flip back and forth in just a few weeks, typically, between fires and floods. We've seen that all too well. I talked about the additional procurement of apparatus. We are in the midst of preparing for our move to the Regional Fire Dispatch Center. Just had a meeting on that this morning. The county fire department has hired the dispatch manager, 4 supervisors, and 18 dispatchers. And they are now, I believe, in their 4th or their 5th week of training at the regional center. So it's full steam ahead for that. The regional center, the building, County Fire will receive the keys on July 5th. But there's going to be some time delay because of the equipment that needs to be moved in and testing, et cetera. We also are focusing on succession planning and leadership development, especially with turnover that has been occurring and will be occurring at our department over the next few years. Priorities for next year, implementing the findings of the standards of cover study. We did just complete an addendum to that to take a look at more robustly at our response times. I wasn't really happy with the first part of the standards of cover study. I just didn't think it really got into our response times enough, so we did an addendum. And we now have 4 years of analysis of over 40,000 calls to get a real idea of where, how, when, et cetera, calls are happening in the city. As I mentioned, we're going to be running an academy after July, probably 9 to 10 personnel. We also have ongoing trainings and recruitment of our Emergency Operations Center. The EOC is run by city employees. And so we get people from Parks and Rec and Finance and Community Development, and we train them in how to handle the intricacies of an EOC. And so we'll be expanding our focus on that. And just like the police department, firefighter wellness is front and center for us. The firefighters were able to secure annual physicals, NFPA, which is the National Fire Protection Administration compliant physicals that they voluntarily go through. There's been a large number of firefighters that are taking advantage of this annual wellness exams. And then also, you may know that through the generosity of 1-805, all of the firefighters in the county have 24/7 access to mental health care in the county, which is excellent. Let's see. Okay, on to Amy. There you go.
Good afternoon, Chair Dozer, Commissioners. Thank you for an opportunity to present our budget to you. I'll just go similar to Mr. Ayala, run through the line items, and at the end, if you have questions, I'll be happy to address them. Starting with our revenues, we have fees and service charges. This represents the funding that the airport pays for Fire Station 8 and the staff that manages that. This has been reduced a little bit this year, or for fiscal year 25, and that's because we're readdressing how we charge them to be more transparent. So they're going to upfront give us the enterprise funds and then pay for certain supplies as needed throughout the fiscal year 25. This also includes our fees for service, our prevention fees, things such as inspections. This year we will have a fee study completed, but in the interim we have added a 5% CPI increase to our fees. The next line item we have is intergovernmental. This represents grants and our mutual aid reimbursement. This year we are switching off of the Coastal Conservancy grant and moving over to the CAL FIRE grant, which is a partnership with Parks and Recreation, so that nearly $3 million will be managed by them and seen in their budget. Our other revenues, that represents AMR reimbursements and our wildfire special assessment district, and taxes is the half-cent sales tax. Next slide. As we go into expenditures, this salary is for our 105 employees and includes the overtime that you heard about for the constant staffing. Just a reminder that anytime anybody is out of the office, well, the folks that you saw in yellow, if they leave for jury duty, for a training, for just a vacation day, then they have to be filled. So every time we send somebody, there's a 24-hour shift that is filled in their response. So that's why our overtime does look exorbitant, but it's so that we can have our services available for everyone 24 hours a day. Also included in that is $850,000 in overtime that is allocated for the mutual aid and is 100% reimbursed. You will see a small reduction in our projections. That's as we fill our 6 vacancies. So when our academy finishes, hopefully we'll have full staff and less overtime. The benefits is the next line. You see an increase due to the increase in UAL across the city. Allocated costs are internal service fees. Then we have supplies and services. This is everything it takes to run the fire station, from medical supplies such as nitrile gloves to office supplies, custodial supplies for 7 stations. We have 7 houses essentially that we take care of. And then the services include things like the medical director that needs to oversee our EMS calls and training. We also have, for every piece of equipment and piece of gear that people have, that requires at least annual inspections, maintenance, and repairs. So as you can imagine, having 8 stations is a very costly item, and so to do it on $1 million is pretty impressive. As you jump down to capital equipment and projects, these are the Measure C allocations, which in fiscal year '25, we have going $850,000 to our regional dispatch center and $370,000 to that very needed equipment replacement fund. That takes care of some of our larger items, including our turnouts, which, as the chief had mentioned, things are getting more expensive by the minute. Turnouts in 2023 cost $2,400 a set. These are the big yellow jackets and pants that you see the firefighters enter structure fires wearing. This year, they're $3,500. So a 25% increase, a little bit more than our CPI. As we continue down, we have special projects, and this is our $600,000 allocation for the academy, which was budgeted in the 2-year budget. And it also includes $94,000 in supplies for the wildfire special assessment district. We have non-capital equipment. Again, this is similar to this station supplies. It's just a little bit larger dollar items. So maybe AED batteries, Plymo vents, some different radio chargers, different things that keep our doors running. In the transfers, that's a $198,000 lease purchase that goes towards the 2 engines that were purchased a couple of years ago, and $196,000 for MDC reserves that we've had over the years that we're going to actually give back to help with the general fund reductions. Yes, please. And just to focus in, similar to police, we have, as far as discretionary, or what you may refer to as discretionary funds, is that 3.1% services and supplies. This, I added the non-capital equipment with the services and supplies, so you could see that when we're asked to cut 3% and 5%, which was totaling over the 2 years, $1.5 million, we have $1.2 million that we can actually look at. Next slide. Measure C, allocation, once again, the breakdown of the $1.2 million that you saw. And again, the equipment replacement is so priceless to us. It helps us replace our radios, extractors, cancer prevention measures. So I can't tell you how nice it is to know that is there, and we can plan very strategically with the replacement. Everything has a service life, maintenance cost. It's just really, really wonderful funding. Thank you. Next slide. In fiscal year '24, the target reduction for fire was $623,000. We were able to come up with $498,000 by eliminating the warehouse specialist position, holding a fire inspector 2, shifting $162,000 out of that supplies and services line, and shifting that to Measure C. We also canceled our custodial contract, returned one of our shared vehicles, and took away take-home vehicles unless staff is on active on-call. Next slide. For fiscal year '25, we were asked to come back and revisit, and this was really, really challenging with such a small discretionary budget. We have our fire inspector 3 position will continue to be held. We are reducing our training services and supplies budget and our training overtime budget. The way the fire department works, as we said before, is for everyone that leaves, there's overtime involved. So our training budget is built into 2 parts. We've got the overtime to pay for the staff that is out of the area, and we also have costs for registrations, per diems, bringing trainers in. So the first line item that we're taking $12,000 away from is only a $60,000 budget for 105 staff. The overtime is only $180,000, so that'll take us down to $140,000. What that means is that we'll be doing mandated trainings and not necessarily looking forward and doing succession planning as well as we'd like to. As far as the MDC replacement fund, that was that property line item that you saw in the revenue. That will be transferred out and no longer being given to us. We'll absorb that in Measure C. And the MDC reserves, we did have a balance, so this will be a one-time, we'll put the reserves into this year's budget and give it back to the budget reduction, meeting, getting us to $479,000 to help the general fund reserves. Next. We have the core goals, and I know I've been talking forever. So these are all available online, and I can just provide a few of the highlights. Major for all of us is a successful integration to regional dispatch. This is going to be great, closest resource. Whoever has the right equipment for you, wherever you're at, is going to come at you first. It's just fantastic. We also want to increase our community engagement and focus on some customer service, all through innovation using the tools that we have, lots of online presence, getting people answers straight away. And next slide. As we continue, we have some organizational optimization, making sure our response times are where they should be. And again, we have the physical health assessments. We're hoping to get our staff to 75%. Those NFPA physicals that the folks are getting are so essential. They have early detection for cancer, heavy metals, all sorts of things that the staff are exposed to on a daily basis. So it's life-saving, and thank you for funding that. The other thing that we have is 75% of staff participating in at least one professional development or external training opportunity annually, and the reduction of the training budget will obviously make this a little bit bigger of a challenge for us. So with that, I will open it up to questions for this guy.
Thank you. Rest. Commissioners? Commissioner Hill.
Just as I understand the slides, there was a target reduction of somewhere around $960,000 and a planned reduction of $479,000. What fills the gap?
The only way the fire department would be able to close that gap is by reducing services. So we're asking to not have to make those cuts. And that runs back to where the chief shared the organizational chart. Should a station be closed or an apparatus browned out, it triggers a 3% increase for all of those staff that you saw highlighted in yellow, which is a significant increase.
So basically, this thing goes back to who made the targeted reduction request? That was from the city?
Right, absolutely. So Commissioner Hill, yeah, the city requested that we try to come up with 2% and 3% consecutively over 24 and 25. This was a painstaking process. There was a lot of discussion with the city manager. She met with each one of the departments. We offered up to hit that number and that goal, but for us, it would have involved significantly, it would have actually been hitting personnel. In other words, we were looking at positions, those 12 positions that we talked about, for example, we were looking at having to potentially offer up those positions, or because we're so lean, as we have to continue to cut, you start looking at what we call service level impacts. Mm-hmm. And that is, do we go without a fire inspector? Do we brown out a fire station? Do we, drop from 4 personnel to 3 personnel on the ladder truck? And these are all really significant operational considerations to make for a fire department. So as I mentioned, we're very lean. And so when we start looking at having to make the cuts, it starts to get into service level impacts like it does with every other department.
So how does it go forward from this point? As you will go back to the city administrator and then ultimately to city council with saying this is what we realistically can do, and somebody else has to make the adjustments?
So, correct. So the budget was given to city council, and it was just a highlighted version, just a very high flight version on last Tuesday. And then in the coming weeks, finance and each department will start getting into more details of what cuts were made, potentially what cuts were put on the table that were determined to not be the direction that the city wanted to go. But ultimately, it'll be the city council determining at some point whether we have to go back to the drawing board or whether they'll accept the cuts that each department has made.
Thank you.
Commissioner Rodriguez?
If it were up to me, I would suggest that we not cut the budget. So I appreciate the time and effort you made, the painstaking effort to find some reductions. I don't know if we're in a position to do so, but I would like to propose that we not cut the training budget. That is so important. So I don't know how we could go about doing that, if I have to make a motion and.
Can I, this is, sorry, Chair Dozier, Commissioner Rodriguez, right now is the question period, so we
Yeah.
can then open up the public comment, then we can start talking about this issue. So
Okay.
let's finish the question period
Okay.
first.
I do have a question, two questions. What do you do with the old rigs?
Commissioner Rodriguez, thank you. That was also being discussed at the chief's level today. Typically so first of all, Public Works owns all of our fire apparatus. The fire department doesn't own, and that's part of the intercity services that you see. Public Works owns it. Our fire apparatus, just so everyone knows, is frontline, meaning it's sitting in the fire station frontline for 15 years, and then at approximately 15 years, it's moved to reserve status. So it becomes a backup unit for another 10 years. So our apparatus that we're purchasing are going to be with our department for 25 years. At that point, when they're deemed surplus and we get a new rig to replace it, then they go back to Public Works. And historically, Public Works has done one of a few things. They will send it to auction, and it's meager. I mean, they don't get much money for a 25-year-old fire engine with, a couple 100,000 miles on it. So it will go to auction. The other things that we have done is we have a sister city program, and fire apparatus has actually gone to Puerto Vallarta before. Equipment has gone to Puerto Vallarta. The discussion today, actually, amongst all of the county's fire chiefs, in fact, right now, Montecito Fire Department is donating a fire engine to Allen Hancock College's fire technology program. So while there's no money exchanged, what happens there is that they receive a credit, and then they're allowed to use the facility and to bring classes in and to occupy the facility, which has a cost and a wear and tear on it. So it's basically they're trading an apparatus for use of their facility. And we're actually looking at that on a more regional basis, because if we were to all donate vehicles, then we would have a greater role in the training facilities.
Thank you. And then, that's interesting. And then my last question is, well, there might be a follow-up question to that one, but, so you have Fire Academy held here,
Correct.
and it's just for the folks who will be working with SBFD?
Correct. So there are a number of ways that fire departments can hire. One of the things that the city has done is to require two major undertakings for the candidate before they become eligible to work for the city fire department. Those are, they have to have their EMT certification, and they also have to attend a fire academy, such as I just mentioned, Allen Hancock. Our next closest is Oxnard. And they have to go through a basic college fire academy that is about 400 hours and a whole semester. Then they go through a testing process that there are a couple different testing services in the state of California. One is run through the California Joint Apprenticeship Commission in cooperation with the California Professional Firefighters. They have a testing service called FCTC, which stands for Fire Candidate Testing Center. They are the largest testing service in California. In fact, right now, to date, today, they have over 4,000 people on that list. Those people may not all have the requirements. So we require a college fire academy because it gives the student, the prospective employee, a really good baseline into a career in firefighting. It exposes them to everything that they would see here at the city. However, the police department's done a great job with post-certification and with training that goes across the state and really almost comparable equipment. The fire department's not quite there yet. But regional dispatch locally is really going to help us with this. So Then what happens is we bring them in and we hire them and we send them through about an 8 or 10-week academy. So could we hire them without the fire academy graduate from a college? Yes, we could. A lot of departments do that. Ventura County is hiring right now. They are hiring, all you have to have is your EMT. They are putting them through a 12-week pre-academy followed by an 18-week academy. So if you think that's basically a 30-week academy, so it becomes very, very expensive. So we have just chosen to do it that way, to require, a lot of the departments require EMT and fire academy. That's very typical.
If I'm Chair, if I don't interrupt, sorry, Chris, I know we're talking about challenges in financial. I don't want us to go down the road of our hiring challenges. It's kind of straying. I'm just trying to stay us on topic
Okay.
for the issue, so apologize for that.
Okay.
No more questions from the commission? Thank you very much. Ms. Clerk, do we have any public comment?
Chair Dozer, we do not have any in-person or online public comment.
Thank you. Can we move on to agenda item number 8?
This is when I can propose that we can accept the budget as presented, or we could possibly make recommendations. And if this is a good time, I would like to recommend that the commission communicate with council that, one, we support the budget as recommended, but then also request reinstating the 40,000, what was it, the 12,500 in training services and supplies, and 40,000 for training overtime budget. So that's my motion, or I guess that's more of a discussion if anybody else wants to discuss that.
Just
Commissioner
a question
Herlinger.
for John, though. So what would be the proper procedure to move Commissioner Rodriguez's suggestion?
Would be a second and then a vote on it. It's proper because it's to receive the report. And as the commission can do, it could be, we have now on our agendas, right? We have on our agendas the commission to issue a public comments. So public comments includes a public comment in support, a statement of support. So that goes in line with Commissioner Rodriguez's proposal. So
So I will second her proposal, or her motion.
All right, we have another, well, we'll have a vote.
Do we have discussion on the subject, or do we vote first?
you can have discussion or vote, up to the commission
Well,
and the chair.
I was trying to recognize Commissioner Hill, and I'm not sure if he had a comment or wanted to discuss this further.
We're sort of wandering through this for the first time, and I completely support the sentiment behind the proposal, but it somehow feels like we're stepping into a highly complex issue where there are many different countervailing forces, and I'm not sure that I have the information to be sure that what we're suggesting is other than the fact that we love our guys, and we want our guys taken care of, without considering the fact that money is fungible and where it comes out of is someplace else. So that's my trouble with it. And I personally would prefer some kind of input from the city administrator's office before we made that recommendation. That's my thought.
Is there a raised hand? Just to respond to that, so when I first is there anybody else that's wanting to speak before?
None that is on the screen.
Okay, so,
I'll just make a comment to respond to, I'm fine with supporting our guys.
Well, we can take a vote, or Commissioner Jones, do you have a comment? No, not at all.
I don't know if Commissioner Hill actually had a question for the city administrator. I heard a question.
I'm not sure I have the purview to ask questions of the city administrator.
So Chair Dozer and Commissioner Hill, this is deliberations. The motion has been made by Commissioner Rodriguez, seconded by Commissioner Herlinger. You can go back and forth in conversation. You can say, I would support the motion if, or I don't support the motion because. So that's simply what's happening right now. So you can continue that conversation. This recommendation to communicate to council is also received by the city administrator, because that's the purview of the Fire and Police Commission to advise both council as well as the city administrator.
So.
And just one more thing I want to add too. So we have a motion on the floor, so we have to eventually, as we deliberate and ask questions and talk about this specific motion that was raised by Commissioner Rodriguez and seconded by Commissioner Hill, before we can go on to anything else, we have to vote on it. But as Barbara said, you can deliberate and discuss it back and forth as you're doing it. So.
To give the commission a little context, when I first got involved with the Fire and Police Commission, it was around budget conversation, and I had recommended that the commission, they were in a position where they had to reduce budget, and I recommended that they added to the budget for a position for Spanish language communication for emergency situations. That wasn't proposed in the fire budget at that time, and it wasn't something that the council had considered. But the commission, the Fire and Police Commission, deliberated on that and then decided ultimately to move forward and to create that position. It ended up being a highly recognized good idea because Liliana received state and national recognition for the work that she's doing, and then other jurisdictions mimicked that same program, and it became a California requirement. So just to give context that this commission has the authority to the chiefs are given an ask, a big ask to reduce their budget. They present that to us for conversation or approval, and then they submit that to city council. They may do a similar thing. They may say, I don't want to reduce the budget, or we need to reduce the budget more. But this is within our purview to say, I think we should keep it as is, or I think we should add or reduce even more. So just to give context that the commission has gone through this before.
Commissioner Jones.
Thank you. I think it's safe to say that everyone in this room supports fire, so I don't think that that's in question. But I do agree with Commissioner Hill, and to your point, it was actually Commissioner Hellinger who made the second.
Yes, yeah.
But I do agree with Commissioner Hill in that I feel as though this is picking out something very particular and specific, and we just had two very robust presentations. I don't feel, I'm feeling a little bit at odds and to target these particular items when there's much more to be considered, not to mention the fungibility of funds, which means the money's got to come from somewhere during, the projected very significant budgetary deficit for the city. I would need more information before, in good conscience, saying, hey, why don't you put some more money here, when we can, there may be more or other areas you may want to consider making such a recommendation.
Well, seeing no further comments from the commission or further discussion, is it appropriate now to take the vote?
Yes, Chair Dozer, you can take a vote.
On the motion I made, that's what we're voting on.
Yes.
Only standing motion.
And Chair Dozer, I'll assist our clerk to say the motion was to communicate to City Council that you've received the budget report and accept the recommended FY25 budget with the recommendation that the allocations for training and supplies at $12,500, as well as training overtime budget at $40,000 would be reinstated.
Can we just add, it's instead the first part, make public comment, because any public comment the commission makes goes to council, goes to the city administrator, and is also public comment, and we have it agendized for every other item. So that makes it
To
just
issue a
safe.
public statement to
Yeah,
City
correct.
Council and the
That-
City
then we're really-
Administrator's Office.
Then
Okay.
we're operating in safe territory, yep.
I'll say yes. $60,000, it's nothing.
Motion passes.
All right, now I believe we are on to agenda item number 8.
Item number 8, Santa Barbara Police Department Racial Identity and Profiling Act Annual Data Report.
So after we had our introduction to RIPA at the last meeting, now we're going to get into actually the specific data for the Santa Barbara Police Department for 2023. So this is a summary of all of our data for 2023. This is the first time we've presented this type of data to the Fire and Police Commission. So we are open to feedback and comments afterwards. We're trying to make sure we hit all what we think are the relevant points, as we have a lot of data. And there's a lot of data, as you've seen, that we shared the presentation ahead of time. So if we miss something, or if there's something that we need to do differently for next time, we can have that discussion at the end. But we were really conscientious about trying to make sure we gave you as much as we could. So there is a lot of data within this report. So Commander Casapis is going to try to move through it really quickly without getting stuck on any particular data points, because there is a lot of data within the presentation.
Thank you, Chief. And thank you, Commissioners. Good afternoon. Again, Charlie Katsapis, Commander at Santa Barbara Police Department. And as the Chief mentioned, last month we spent a lot of time talking about the foundation of RIPA. Today we're going to be going over a quick recap of that information. That was a lot, so to give you some context of what we're looking at today, we'll talk a little bit about demographics, so local demographics, our officer demographics, and how that plays into how we look at the RIPA data. Tests for disparities, so what are some tests that are out there for disparities in order to looking at this data and to determine whether or not we see any disparities. Our Santa Barbara Police Department data elements, the concept of bias by proxy, and then we'll sum it up with a summary and then open it up for any questions or comments. So just a quick recap from last month. Again, RIPA was introduced as Assembly Bill 953 and was effective January 1st of 2016. This made it so that all law enforcement agencies in the state of California had to collect perceived demographic and other data related to the stops, both traffic and pedestrian, that we conducted. Again, this was an effort to eliminate racial and identity profiling by law enforcement, and that data, those data elements were required for applicable stops, detentions, searches, and arrests as we defined last month. All this data is to be reported to the Department of Justice on an annual basis and to be analyzed and also to be looked at by the RIPA board that we talked about for the production of their annual report. We talked a little bit about this form on the left, that CJS 2000. So this is a 4-page form. There's lots of data that we collect, but I wanted to just cover some of the highlights. So reason for the stop, action taken during the stop, search information, result of the stop, and then again, perceived race or ethnicity, perceived gender, perceived sexual orientation. This is the first data point we're going to look at regarding demographics. So this is City of Santa Barbara demographics. This becomes important as we look at RIPA data as well as officer data here in a minute. So City of Santa Barbara, this comes from our most recent census data, about 55% white, 36% Hispanic, 3.5% Asian, 3.3% other, and about 1.5% African American. If you look here, this is Santa Barbara PD officer demographics. You'll see this looks strikingly similar to what we just saw with our city's demographics. So our officer demographics, about 51% white, 33% Hispanic Latino, 6% 2 races or more, 3% Filipino, and then 3.38% both for Asian and African American. This next slide here is to show you that comparison. And as I mentioned, it's pretty strikingly similar. And the reason why I wanted to show you this is because there's a lot of research out there. There's been a lot of discussion nationally about city police departments matching the demographics of their community and the benefit of that when it comes to eliminating disparities, when it comes to perceptions of trust and actually building real trust. And so this is an effort that we've gone through over years now of recruiting for diversity, as the chief mentioned earlier, recruiting from people from within our community so that we have this reflection of our demographics matching that of our community. These are the gender demographics of the Santa Barbara Police Department's officers currently. So you see 75% male, 24.6% female. Just to give you some context, nationally the average is about 12% female for agencies. If you break that down even further to women in leadership, it's about 4%. For the Santa Barbara Police Department, you can see here, we're about double that national average for our total officers female. And if you look at our command staff, which I would consider like our commander rank up through our chief, it's 50% female, 50% male. So as we get closer here to looking at our data, there's lots of tests for disparities that are out there. Anytime you look at and analyze data, there's different ways you can look at it to see if you can identify any disparities in the stuff you're looking at. We're going to focus really on two. The residential population comparison, this is probably the most common. This is comparing stop data to residential population data. This analysis does assume that the distribution of those who are stopped are likely resemble the demographics of the region. A couple factors that might play into skewing that a little bit. We have some of those factors here, so I'll cover that as well. Second test we'll talk about is this outcome comparison. So this is comparing stop outcome data across categories of race and identity. What we're really looking for is that are there disparities in outcomes? So like are perceived negative outcomes more frequent for one ethnicity or race or identity than another? And so we'll use those two today in the context of looking at some of our data. So when I talked a little bit about some of the things that might skew data when you're looking at the residential population comparison, the biggest one that we face here, well, two things. Number one, we're a commuter city. That first image on the right-hand side there, that's from the EDD. That's the amount of folks that commute into our county to work on a daily basis. Of course, that's not all city of Santa Barbara, but they're calling it 27,000 people that commute into the county to work here. And then below that, that's a media snippet. That's 7.2 million visitors that City of Santa Barbara had in our city during, I believe, last year. So the reason why we show this is because we make tons and tons of non-residential contacts. So even though we want to see that data look really close when comparing it, it could potentially be skewed by the fact that a lot of folks who aren't necessarily residents here do get contacted by our officers. So for our data specifically, this is what we're going to focus on today. We're going to look at our RIPA count by month. We're going to look at our stop data by race and ethnicity, perceived gender, perceived sexual orientation. We'll look at the reasons for the stops that we're making, the results of those stops, and we'll talk a little bit about searches. So here's our first slide. This is our RIPA count by month. And as you can see here, on average, we do about 850 contacts a month that result in RIPA reporting. This is pretty typical for what you can expect in Santa Barbara. We tend to see a decrease in contacts during our late fall, winter months. And then you see an increase through the summer months and the spring months. August is going to always be an anomaly and our highest. As you all know, we have Old Spanish Days in August that every single employee at our department works during that week. And we make a lot of proactive contacts intentionally to prevent issues of public safety. And so that's why you see that spike in August. This is the perceived race or ethnicity of those stopped by our officers. As you can see here, about 47% are perceived as white, about 41% Hispanic, about 6% African American, and then about 1.3% Asian. So this will be a category we'll look at from the lens of that first comparison for test for disparities, the residential comparison. So as you can see here, these are pretty similar stats when it comes to the numbers that are stopped here compared to our local population. Again, those numbers will be skewed somewhat by some of those factors we discussed, but what we do want to see is something similar to this, which is pretty strong similarities between local demographics and demographics of those stopped by our officers. This is gender perceived. So RIPA gives us 5 categories. Of those 5 categories, 75% were perceived as male, 24.4% as female, and then about 0.2% in the other 3 categories that were offered to our officers. Sexual orientation perceived, so the way that this is listed on the data entry is either yes or no to the question, is LGBT? So 99.4% of the time, our officers perceived as no, and at about 0.5% of the time, the perception was yes. So reason for the stop, why are officers conducting stops? The number one reason at 52.16% would be reasonable suspicion that a person has engaged in criminal activity. This is our standard detention. So this can come from a call for service that's called in by the public, or this can come from an officer seeing on-view activity, or in other words, witnessing something that they perceive as reasonable suspicion that would allow them to make a detention. The second highest category at 37% is a traffic violation, so this is our traffic stop. Next, known to be on parole, probation, or some sort of supervision at 5%. And then consensual encounters resulting in search, that's at 2.5%. That's a pretty low number. I know last month one of the commissioners had asked a little bit about field interview cards and conducting consensual encounters for the purposes of conducting searches. We don't do that all too often, as you can see here. That's a very small percentage of our stops. So this is a lot of data. I get it. Reason for stop by perceived race, and we've got lots of numbers here. But when you look at all these numbers in their totality, what we were looking for is any like major disparities or like things that stand out. And like when you go through the categories for the different sections compared to the total numbers at the bottom there, we didn't see anything that was of massive anomaly. And that's what we wanted to see when looking at this data. So the results of the stop, what is the ultimate result of the stop? The largest category for us is a warning. So either a written or verbal warning. So at 35% of the stops we're conducting result in a warning. 16% result in a citation for an infraction. That's for local ordinances, so those are municipal code sections. About 12% result in in-field citations, so that's for something other than municipal code. And then custodial arrests, only at 11%, so only 11% of those stops result in a custodial arrest. Multiple selected would be if we perhaps gave a warning on one section but cited on another. And then FI completed, that's that field interview we talked about last month, at about 4% of those contacts. And then no action taken at all for about another 4%, and the rest is pretty small. So this goes to that second test for disparities. This is the outcome comparison. So we'll spend just a minute looking at this. I recognize that it's a ton of data, but it's really hard to put it in a different format that's easier to see. But this will list on the far right-hand side percentage of RIPA. If we look at those total percentages on the far right-hand side and we start looking through each of those categories, we'll see that for the most part, the percentages are pretty standard across the board. There are some differences. A lot of the ones that have bigger differences, as you can see at the very bottom, the sample size is really small. So they're quickly skewed by just a few different contacts. But when you look at some of the larger bullet points of numbers, what we want to see and what we tend to see is just relatively similar percentages throughout categories across the board here. Now we'll talk just a minute about searches. So only about 27% of our contacts result in searches. And when you really break this down a little bit further, you'll see that most of the searches we conduct are by best practice, and I'll get into that just now. So at 8.69%, which is the second highest category, we have incident to arrest. So this is when we make a custodial arrest. Best practice is that we conduct a full search before placing someone in our car and taking them to jail. So that's going to, by policy and by best practice, result in a search. The second category after that would be condition of parole, probation, or mandatory supervision. Oftentimes, if someone's on probation or parole, they've waived their Fourth Amendment rights are waived, right, to search and seizure. And so best practice for an officer in that encounter is to likely conduct a search. And so you can expect to see that there. So when you really look at it, you've got that 73% no search conducted, and then you have this 8.6 and the 7% when it's really mandated by best practice or policy. What I'm trying to get at is that very few of these contacts result in a search at all. So RIPA and calls for service. As we discussed last month, some of these are on view, meaning the officer makes a stop based upon what they've seen, but a lot of these are from calls for service. So the public calls in a call for service through 911 or non-emergency, we would respond to it. So it's about 62% officers on viewing in action or doing a stop that's not a call for service, and about 37%, these are calls for service. So that's 3,481 times that we stop someone based upon a call for service. So this concept of bias by proxy, because this does come up in the RIPA report, and this is when an individual calls the police and makes false or ill-informed claims about persons they dislike or are biased against. And this really goes towards this idea of responding to the biases of other. And this is a challenge for law enforcement, right? So I talk about the challenges of call taking. Call takers are predisposed to take information on face value and to develop calls for service that we now are dispatched to. So sometimes this puts us in the position, potentially, under the concept of bias by proxy, of responding to the biases of others. And so how do we overcome this? A few different ways. In talking to our dispatch manager, our dispatchers go through 120 hours of dispatch training in like a dispatch academy before they're actually taking calls. Part of that includes best practices for issues such as this. Our dispatchers are also part of our ongoing training when it comes to issues surrounding racial profiling. And a big thing too is dispatcher background. So a lot of people don't understand or don't realize that our dispatchers, just like officers, go through full backgrounds, including psychological evaluations, including polygraph exams. The reason for that is because we're trying to screen out any sort of bias on the front end as well, in addition to the training they receive afterwards. But I bring up the concept of bias by proxy because our officers also respond to calls for service that in some ways are largely out of their control in terms of who they're going to contact based upon information given by the public. So just to summarize what we talked about today, we have about 10,000 total RIPA contacts in 2023. Santa Barbara Police Department is in compliance with RIPA reporting. In fact, we just completed that in April. Officer demographics mirror the community demographics. That's a big win for us. That's intentional. We talked a little bit about tests for disparities, and when we look at those two tests, we don't see any massive anomalies or causes for concern. And then continued training, both for our officers and our dispatchers. And part of our post-ongoing training actually requires racial profiling training. So in addition to that, we've also committed to additional training on top of that as well. So that concludes our RIPA summary for 2023, and we'd be happy to open it up for questions or comments. Thank you.
Thank you, Commander. Questions? Perhaps raise your hand since there's nothing on my screen. Commissioner Hill.
Actually, a comment. I think this is incredible. I think that it really is the proof in the pudding.
Thank you, and I would absolutely agree. It once again speaks to the really outstanding work that all of the department and professional staff are doing within our everyday interactions with the community.
So I'll pile on with Commissioner Hill. I agree. It's a terrific report. Thank you.
Commissioner Rodriguez.
I concur. Just congratulations and great job on the recruitment and retention of diverse demographics within the department. That is so huge. In the summer of 2020, when communities around the nation were coming together calling for transparency and police oversight, this is the type of data that they were calling for. This data on complaints, data on mission strategies. This is exactly what communities were looking for. And for those who were historically negatively impacted by policing, the report that you just showed, that you just gave us, gives them comfort and safety knowing that our Santa Barbara Police Department is policing them equally. So I don't know how we can, Ms. Anderson, but if we could make this, especially in Spanish language, if we could make this more, highlighted, whether it's through the city video or a press release or something, but this is the type of information that makes communities who are scared of police less scared. Thank you and great job.
Seeing no further questions or comments, is there any public comment?
Chair Dozer, we don't have any in-person or online public comments.
Great.
If I may just, Chair Dozier, just say one thing. I don't mean to be tedious, and usually we don't have much public comment, but there may be issues we do. Why we want to do questions and then public comment and then the commentary is important. I just want to explain, why we do it that way. So we do a report and we ask questions to gather further information. And then when we want to allow public comment, because there may be something the public will say that is interesting or trigger something, then with that combination of the presentation, the questions, and the public comment you get, then it's time to make kind of assertions. So just as a gentle reminder for the commission, always remember question period, public comment, and then the commentary at the end. So I don't mean to be a stickler on it, but I just wanted to explain why is that process and why is it there for, and that's the reason for it, so.
Well, and we appreciate you keeping us on track, so do that whenever we need it.
And Chair Dozer, in light of time, you're welcome at any moment to make a motion, if it's seconded, to continue any items to next month's meeting. So again, just wanted to offer that as an option as well.
Well, and before we started on the next agenda item, in light of the fact that it's almost 6, and I know that Commissioner Hill has something, not immediately, but fairly soon, I would like to make a motion that we continue items 9 and 10, which are quarterly reports, until next month.
9 and 10, but not 11.
Correct. 9 and 10, but not 11.
You need a second?
I do.
I will second.
All right. Can we take a vote?
Motion passes.
All right. We are moving on to agenda item number 11.
Item 11, quarterly report on complaints of police misconduct.
This will also be Commander Casapis, but it's very short this month.
Yes, Commissioners, so under your powers and duties, specifically under Section 2.09.040 of the ordinance, you're to receive reports, obviously, on a quarterly basis, including those surrounding department complaints. And so I will cover that for this month. The first thing we'll talk about, the number of complaints of the department's sworn employees. For the first quarter, so that's January through March, we have had 2 complaints come in, 1 citizen complaint and 1 administrative complaint. The second component of the report would be the number of pending professional standard unit cases or investigations and the relevant sections. It's going to be the same 2, and the relevant sections for those would be failure to take reasonable action while on duty, and the second will be discourteous or disrespectful treatment of any member of the public.
All right, thank you. That was quick. Any comments, commissioners, or questions? All right. Oh, Commissioner Herlinger.
That we got in our email, we got a complaint about the city, the parking lot situation where there was a complaint handicapped. So I just want to make clear that that's not part of the police department.
Commissioner Herlinger, you're correct. That was directed to the downtown parking team to be able to address that complaint.
Okay.
Is there any public comment?
Chair Dozer, we don't have any in-person or online public comment.
Great, thank you. All right, agenda item 12.
Public statement from the commission.
All right, commissioners, this is our first public statement that we are working on here. Vice Chair Hill and I are proposing to issue a public statement on behalf of the commission that speaks to recent reporting from the police department and our commission's priorities. I'm going to read the statement, so bear with me, it's long, and then we'll open it up for commission questions. This is entitled, "The Numbers Speak for Themselves." The purpose of the Fire and Police Commission is to act in an advisory capacity to the City Council and the City Administrator in all matters relating to the efficient and adequate fire and police protection for the City of Santa Barbara. As a result of local advocacy for more transparency among law enforcement agencies, the Commission was reconstituted last year with 5 new members and newly assigned duties to provide the public with representatives that could ask questions, obtain answers, and build a collaborative and trusting relationship between the Santa Barbara Police Department and the community. The new commission held its first meeting on January 25th, 2023. Over the last year, both the Police Department under Chief Kelly Gordon and the City Fire Department under Chief Chris Males have provided detailed briefings on the policies, procedures, and operational aspects of their departments. They have also responded to extensive questions from the Commission. The Commission would like to state that the levels of effort, transparency, and data reporting have been exemplary and have shown a serious commitment both to the Commission and to the goal of a collaborative and trusting relationship with the Santa Barbara community. In particular, we would like to commend the work of the new Police Chief, Kelly Gordon, and her executive team in their efforts to promote the well-being of both Police Department employees and the community at large through extensive community outreach and training in harm reduction and de-escalation techniques. At the start of this year, the Commission received the completed audit of the Santa Barbara Police Department from the OIR group. The auditor highlighted several areas of strength about department leadership, community engagement, as well as the extraordinarily limited number of use of force investigations. The OIR group also highlighted the low number of complaints received by the department. This was further reinforced by the annual reports submitted to the Commission this year that showed a 37% reduction in incidents of force used, which is a total of 93 incidents of 47,232 calls for service and down from 147 incidents the prior year. The department also reported receiving only 26 complaints for the year, of which 8 were sustained. Moreover, of the 31 recommendations noted in the audit report, 25 of them have already been implemented, which also demonstrates the Santa Barbara Police Department's commitment to continuous improvement. At this time, the Commission would like to publicly recognize, commend, and appreciate the outstanding work done by the officers of the Santa Barbara Police Department. Chair Linda Dozer emphasized, "We believe the numbers speak for themselves." Moving forward, one of the Commission's top priorities is directly engaging the residents of Santa Barbara in our work. The Commission is dedicated to strengthening the relationship between the community and the Santa Barbara Police Department and Fire Department by providing transparent oversight and increased civilian input regarding departmental policies, practices, and procedures. We want to meet with you in your neighborhoods, hear from you directly, and address issues that are important to you, shared Vice Chair Gary Hill. The Commission is also focused on ensuring that the Police Department and Fire Department have the resources and personnel they need to ensure the highest levels of public safety, including timely response to the complex situations that our community members are facing every day. We recognize the city is stepping into a budgeting process where the mayor and council will have a number of challenging decisions to address an over $7 million deficit. The Commission believes that the Police Department and Fire Department deserve the highest priority in resource allocation, especially in retaining and recruiting employees that will continue to meet the exemplary levels of service and community policing. For more information on the City of Santa Barbara City of Santa Barbara Fire and Police Commission is available at our website. All commission meetings are live streamed and recordings are available at our website. Thank you. Are there any clarifying questions from commissioners on that statement?
The only thing is that when you talk about the OIR group, we need to, if it's for public, we need to explain what that is, because it doesn't mean anything to anybody.
And Chair Dozer, Commissioner Hoinger, we can address that when we get to comments or refinements we want to make to the statement. But right now, it's clarifying questions.
Okay. Anyone else, is there anything else that could be clarifying question answer here? Would there be any public comment for this?
Chair Dozer, we do not have any in-person or online public comment.
City Attorney Duemas, are we in a position that we can entertain a motion on this item?
You can do anything, Chair Dozier. You can have a motion, you can, oh, you need a motion,
I like
right?
that
So
answer.
you can entertain a motion, you can have a little further discussion. There can be a motion someone offers and second and deliberation on that. As far as the OAR group, you can, I think what would be easy too is you can, since it's a public statement, you can add a footnote and you have a link to them or a brief description, so it doesn't necessarily have to be part of the statement. There can be a footnote that can just describe who they are and a link to they are. I think that's a good resource for the public if they need that. So there could be a motion to approve the statement in a second or in deliberation at that point to add or make comments or suggestions.
Do we have a motion?
This is when you ask if there's any further discussion.
Any further discussion?
Thank you. Thank you both for putting this together. I really appreciate it. And I can appreciate also the relevance of the title, the numbers speak for themselves. I wonder if we could entertain, there's another portion of our work that is mentioned here on the second page, which is the other part of our mission is engaging the residents of the community, which we're still, trying to figure out. We're still exploring how to do that. I feel as though, again, the numbers are very important. I wonder if there's any way we can capture that element that we are still in the process of, that's still evolving in the title. And then second, well, that's the first thing. So it may be nuanced. I think it's wonderful. But I think we could potentially, I'm not sure. I'm just, I'm going to leave it at that for the moment while I'm getting my thoughts together.
Well. Commissioner Herlinger?
I think it's addressed very well when, in the quote, "We want to meet with you in your neighborhoods, hear from you directly, and address issues that are important to you." I think that, isn't that the essence of what you're suggesting?
Commissioner Jones?
It is. My suggestion is, as I'm thinking this through, is that the title, the numbers speak for themselves. This is the first statement that we're putting out, right?
Yes.
So it feels to me perhaps it should be something along the lines of that recognizes or that acknowledges this is the first statement of the Fire and Police Commission or first update or something that's not as, I don't want to make, again, I'm not going to, make a mountain out of a molehill, but I feel as though that there's something that could be, it could be articulated, it could be captured differently.
Do you have a suggestion?
I'm working on it.
How about Fire and Police Commissioner issues their first public statement? Bing.
I agree with what my fellow commissioner is saying, and maybe something along the lines of numbers speak for themselves, and we want to hear from you.
Commissioner Rodriguez, I was actually thinking, and hearing more from our community is our top priority.
Love it. Yeah. Thank you for bringing that up.
Commissioner Jones, any further discussion on the changes? All right. Is there a motion with
I would
these
like to
new
move to
changes?
accept this with the modification that has just been suggested into the title of the document.
I just want to check in again. Is there any public comment now that we've changed this?
Chair Dozer, we do not have any in-person or online public comment.
And Mr. Doimus, is it possible to add what was approved today in regards to the budget recommendation to the budget paragraph? To make it one statement, or would it have to be two separate statements?
Well, the budget one, just to clarify, because the commission made a public statement on the budget, so
Right.
they already approved that. I wouldn't merge it into this document. I would have two separate statements, and the two separate statements can be, they're issued both to the council, city administrator, and then placed on the website.
Okay, thank you.
Do we have a second to the motion?
Yes, do we have a second to the motion?
Second.
And for assisting the clerk, the motion is to accept the first public statement on behalf of the Fire and Police Commission with the changes to the title, as noted here and discussed. First public statement and hearing more from our community is a top priority. And then we're going to add a footnote to the OAR group, a link to the organizational website. And those are the changes as part of the motion.
Thank you.
Thank you for that clarification.
Motion passes.
All right. We are on to agenda item number 13. Commission and staff communications. Does anyone have anything to share or to bring to our attention they'd like to agendize for the future?
I just want to quickly share that I went on a ride-along about 2 weeks ago, and this is my third ride-along, and everyone was different in the details, but the totality showed that our police officers are part crime fighters, part social workers, part public presence, and they do this every day. It was impressive.
Anyone else? Commissioner Jones?
I would echo that, but, and for my ride-alongs, it occurred to me, and I said to the folks that were guiding me, that it's very clear there's a whole other world that the majority of people who are in our society are not even aware of that exists, that kind of underpins and undergirds our society. So it was really very eye-opening, to say the least.
Okay, hearing nothing else, this brings us to the end of the Fire and Police Commission meeting on April 25th, 2024. Meeting is adjourned at 6:12 p.m. Great job. I wanted to use that.